Well, I guess we should get started. I'd like to welcome you all out this morning for the presentation on open source expert systems in legal clinics. And I guess to begin, I just wanted to tell you a little bit of background about this project. It started out, we called it the Law Expert because we envisioned this as being an expert system that would be primarily geared towards legal clinics and law schools in particular. But as I got further into the project, I realized that there would probably be wider application for this software than just in legal clinics. And so when I presented this to John for the conference as an idea for a topic of discussion for the conference, at that point we were calling it the Law Expert. And in the meantime, it's morphed into openexpert.org. And you can probably guess the website we're using by the name that we've given the project. So before I get going, I'll just review what we're going to be covering. We'll first talk a little bit about what is an expert system, so we're all on the same sheet. We'll talk about why expert systems in legal clinics. We'll do a demonstration of the software. And we'll also talk a little bit about why we decided to go the open source route rather than keep the software to ourselves or to try to sell it. And lastly, we'll talk a bit about how you can use the software if you want and how we encourage people to give back to the community. So let's start with a definition. I got this from wikipedia.org. It's actually a pretty good place for finding definitions. And they say there that an expert system is a program made up of a set of rules that analyze information, usually supplied by the user of the system, about a specific class of problems, as well as provide an analysis of the problem, and depending upon their design, a recommended course of user action in order to implement corrections. So put it in a little more simple terms, basically an expert system will lead the user through a set of questions in order to better define and narrow down the problem, and then hopefully give the user a course of action or suggestions on what they can do to help solve the problem. And that course of action may be to talk to an expert because the question is too difficult for the system to deal with effectively. But it'll give them some sort of direction at the end on how to solve their problem. So just to give a more general example of an expert system, probably the example that people are most familiar with are the medical diagnostic books that you see every now and again. So if you've got an ailment, you've got a pain down here, you can go through and look under abdomen pain and hopefully get a preliminary diagnosis of what your problem is. So just to give us an example to work with, I'd selected one that I'm familiar with, and I think maybe some of you might be familiar with, and that's diagnosing forgetfulness and confusion. So typically, we start in the top left, if you look in the medical books, and I shamelessly stole this from our medical book at home. So we start in the top left, in the blue box there. Has the confusion or forgetfulness developed suddenly or in the past few hours? Now let's suppose it is this. In my case, this is a rather sudden onset of confusion. Have you injured your head within the past few hours or weeks? I will say no to that. I haven't injured my head recently. Have you noticed one or more of the following symptoms? Numbness, tingling, blurred vision, weakness in the arms or legs? Let's say that I am having some of those symptoms. So so the advice that this expert system is giving me is to consult my doctor without delay because I could be having a heart attack. So that's one possible outcome given my particular set of circumstances. If at the beginning I'd said that I hadn't injured my head, or that I had injured my head, again, call your doctor. Bruising or a more serious form of damage to the brain may have been caused by the bang to my head. So you can see how it's a wizard-type system. And in this case, there was much, much more. I put little dotted lines. This covered about 2 8.5 by 11 pages. And in almost all the cases, except for one or two, you were referred or you were counseled to talk to a doctor just to make sure it wasn't anything more serious. So why an expert system in legal clinics? There are usually there's a set of reasons for most organizations to implement an expert system, and they almost all hold true for legal clinics. The first one is it helps preserve the knowledge of the staff, and it builds up the corporate memory of the clinic. And this is a particularly important or valuable thing for an organization that has a high turnover rate. And in the case of legal clinics, by design, they have a high turnover rate. Usually every semester or two, you have a whole brand new set of students coming in. So you can help preserve your corporate knowledge or the knowledge in your individuals through an expert system so that it can be passed on more effectively. Directly related to that is that you can help to train your students when they arrive. And this is particularly important from what I have heard from the director of our legal clinic at the beginning of the semester. Because the students, they may have been going to law school, but often don't have a real grasp on the practical end of the law. And the staff lawyers that they get help from are typically overwhelmed at the beginning of the semester with lots of small questions from the students. And so an expert system at the beginning of the semester, they can be referred to that so that they can go through their particular problem and have the key pivotal points of the law shown to them so that when they do talk to the staff lawyer, they have a better understanding of where the key issues are. And also, later in the semester, it can help the students find solutions to problems more quickly, or at least have the problems categorized. And the last reason, possible reason for having an expert solution is the possibility of self-service. So instead of clients coming in and talking to a student, technically speaking, we could have them direct them to a website where they could go through the expert system themselves, much like we did in our example of the forgetfulness. They may not get an exact answer to their question, but it'll help categorize their problem and then direct them to possible help, which in most cases would be a lawyer to help them with their problem. But at least they'll have a general understanding of their problem by the time they go to see the lawyer. So if we can have a self-serve system, why not just replace the students with an expert system? That would, save the staff lawyers a lot of problem. They wouldn't have to answer a whole bunch of dumb questions at the beginning of the semester. And just to give you a personal example of why that might not be a good idea, a few years ago I woke up in the middle of the night and I had sort of a burning sensation in my chest. So I thought, it must have been the pizza or something. So I popped some Tums and didn't do anything to the problem I was having. So I got out my good old diagnostic book and tried to figure out myself what the problem was. And as I looked through the different areas of this book, I sort of settled in on the chest pain area because it was sort of up here that I was feeling the discomfort. And as I went through all the different paths on the wizard, I thought, geez, I might be having a mild heart attack here, because I couldn't sleep. It was at that level of discomfort. And so at that point, I woke my wife and told her I should probably get to the hospital just to make sure it wasn't anything more serious. So I got to the hospital, and I was used to, in our socialized medical system in Canada, used to waiting in the emergency room for some time for stitches and other things like that. But it's amazing how quick service you get when you complain of chest pains when you arrive. So I was immediately fired into the back. They all wired me up to, see what was going on. They did a chest X-ray, and the doctor came back eventually and told me he didn't think I was having a heart attack. So I was relieved to hear that. And he asked me a few more questions, and he told me, you're probably just suffering from acid reflux. And I had never heard of that before, and so he explained, and yeah, that's probably what it was. So he gave me some extra strength Tums or something like that, and I was fine. I went home and slept for the rest of the night. But the reason why I tell you this story is it illustrates some of the weaknesses of an expert system. Expert systems are good, but they're even better when you have an informed person that's using them. And that's why it would still be good and useful to have students, people with legal training, helping guide people through the expert system. You may want people to be able to use it on their own, but in the end, it's always better to have someone with a little more knowledge about the area of expertise guiding the person through. So as I mentioned, or as I should say, it's not good at all types of problems. It's not good in areas where there's lots of subjective evaluations. It's not good where there's uncertainty. It's very good at yes-no tree-type analysis like we saw in the forgetfulness example. It's good at clearly defined law with lots of options. And the examples that the director of our legal clinic gave to me of areas where he thinks that it will work very well will be in areas like tax law, divorce, child support variance orders, and things of that nature. Let's see. So let's do a demonstration, and I'll show you an example that we put together. The first one is of a divorce expert. Second one is a laptop expert that I built so I know intimately. And then we'll go through and show you how you can edit the system, just so you can get a feel for how difficult this would be to do, and if you would be comfortable turning something like this over to a staff lawyer to build. Because the thing that I didn't want to do is, as a person supporting a system like this, was to have to build all these things, all these areas of expertise for the clinic. I wanted to be able to hand the software over to them and then basically let the experts dump their expertise into the system without my assistance, except for possibly training up front. So here's the page. It's quite simple and quite small, and the reason why I made it simple and small is so that it would work in a small form factor as well. So if you have, for example, a Trio device or a wireless Palm device, you could use this system on that device. It's small enough that it'll fit, and you could use it. So we'll start with the divorce example. And as I said, you're led through a series of questions. So the first question is, are you married? That's a fairly upfront, straightforward question. If you say no to that question, surprise, surprise, no worries, you don't need a divorce because you're not married. And it was our staff lawyer that put that in. I don't know if that ever happens, but so yes, I'm married, and we'll go on to the next question. Was your spouse married at the time you were married? And now this is, we'll say yes to this. Let's say they hadn't got a divorce yet and they were married to someone else. We go next, and it tells you an annulment may be appropriate. See the following link for on how to obtain an annulment. So this is a possible grounds to, not necessarily for a divorce, but to get out of your marriage. But you may have other grounds to be able to get a divorce or get out of that marriage. So you select continue on. And then have you separated from your spouse? Oh, do you know what? We're at the wrong site. Sorry, just let me do something real quick here. I made changes last night, of course, and moved the site to a different server, and we were looking at the old one. So let me just... okay. See, the items to follow up on, that's what I added last night. So we'll continue on. And that'll follow us through so that at the end, when this is, let's say this was a self-serve option, or even if a student was doing this, they can see the items, the key areas that they need to follow up on. So the next question, was your spouse mentally incompetent at the time of your marriage? Well, she married me, so that is a possibility. So we'll say yes to that one too. So that's another grounds for annulment, again. Mental incompetence at the time of marriage is grounds. So we've got 2 items to follow up on. One, she was already married and she may have been mentally incompetent. So we'll continue on. Was your spouse physically incapable of having sexual relations after you were married? We won't say yes to that one, but that's another grounds for annulment, possible grounds for annulment. We'll say no to that. And that'll skip us over another few questions. Are you separated from your spouse? If we say no to that one, please see the following link about family counseling. But items need to be followed up on there are the possibilities for annulment that we already covered. So if we back up, have you separated from your spouse? Yes. Then we go down, we continue down the tree. So in this case, there's about 25 different questions that can be asked. And I believe there's about 8 possible outcomes depending on how you answer these questions. And they aren't particularly difficult questions, but you have to ask all of the questions. And in the case of our law clinic, the reason why our staff or our director gave me this one to begin with is it's an area where they typically have the students making mistakes, mostly because they aren't asking all of the questions. And they will ask some of the questions and start down one of those 8 paths and get to a certain point and realize that, oh no, I forgot to ask that question, and we should be over there, not over here, filling out a different set of forms, and I've already got them filling out. So it wastes the time of the student and possibly wasting the client's time because they may have to fill out a new set of forms because maybe they could get an annulment because they forgot to ask about the mental incompetence, for example, instead of having to go through to do some sort of a divorce. And that is the primary, I think that's the primary reason why our director wanted a system like this, is because of the mistakes that were being made in not really esoteric areas of law, but just the straightforward procedures that weren't being followed. So we'll go back. And I'll show you the laptop example because it doesn't have nearly as many questions. And will be easier to show you how to modify and change. Yeah, go ahead. Depending on, if you don't know, usually it's a carry forward item to look into. So yeah. Yeah, exactly. If, for example, if one of the questions, I'm not sure if we got to it, but it asks you if a divorce has been started in another jurisdiction, and if you say I don't know to that one, it'll send you to a link to a site where you can do a search. Probably just a search for British Columbia, but you can do some searching to see if a divorce has already been started somewhere else. So yeah, it does have that functionality built into it, but the person building that area of expertise has to put that in. Yeah, interrupt me at any time. Sorry, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. If you have any questions, just let me know. So back to our laptop example. This one's more simple. Our first question is, what's your price range? When people ask me, faculty or students ask me what type of laptop, usually my first question is, how much money do you have, or how much money do you want to spend? Well, let's say, in the case of the students, usually they'll say less than $1,500. So I'll say next, and we're at the end, right, for that answer. Buy a cheap, heavy computer with a smaller screen. You're done. You're getting, the low-end Dell or the low-end HP laptop, basically, if you're looking at under $1,500. If we have more than $1,500, then we have more options, obviously. Next question, do you travel a lot? Yes, no, maybe. Let's say I do travel a lot. Would you like to have a built-in removable disk? Do you want a CD-ROM or a floppy drive? We'll say yes to that. There you go. Buy a mid-range Centrino laptop that weighs 5 or 6 pounds. Now, there are only 4 possible outcomes that I've put into this area of expertise. One is a cheap, heavy laptop. Another one is a sort of a Centrino mid-weight with removable storage. Another one is an ultra lightweight. And the last one is a big 17-inch, one of those monster laptops with sound like a jet engine when you turn them on because they got a big fan in them. So, I'll just show you now how you make changes to it. Let's say that on the low end we want to ask them another question or two for the under $1,500. So we'll go into the laptop one. And this is the interface that I built. And I'm not real happy with it, and I'm probably going to be making some changes to it in the next couple of weeks. But I'll show you basically how it works. Up top, we have the top-level question. What type of laptop should I purchase? That's up top there. And then we have our first question, number 1. What is your price range? We got our 2 answers down here, less than $1,500, more than $1,500. And over to the right, you've got the link. So if it's less than $1,500, then we go to question 2. If it's more than $1,500, then we go to question 3. And as you can see under question 2, there are no other options underneath it. So that basically means that's the end of this part of the wizard. They've got their answer when they hit that point. Well, let's say that instead of just buying a cheap, heavy computer with a small screen, we want to ask them if it's important to them to have a brand name or if a no-name type laptop will do, just to help them a little bit more. So we'll make that change right now. I'll delete this, and then do you want a brand name laptop? And we'll save that. Then we'll go down to the bottom here, and we'll add a new answer. So for our brand new, we want a yes and a no. So we'll link this to question 2. Add. So we've got a yes, and we'll add a no to question 2 as well. So, do you want a brand name laptop? We got our yes or no. Right now they're linked to 0, which is nothing, which won't do us any good. So we need to have our advice. So it's put in the form of a question. Again, as I said, I'm going to be making changes to this. And if you have any suggestions, I'd be happy to hear them. But if they want a brand name, then buy a Dell or HP or Apple laptop. So add that. That gets added down to the bottom as number 10. So do you want a brand name laptop? We'll link the yes to number 10. Oh, I got an error coming up here. That should be no. Knew I shouldn't have played with it last night. Anyways, we'll go and show you what that looks like. See, so we'll select a less than $1,500 laptop, and I've got 2 yeses. I'll work on that tonight. So we'll select the yes, and there's our advice: buy a Dell or an HP laptop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Suppose instead of changing your question number 2, the second one you want to go to, you wanted to insert a new number 2, but still leave the 2 to be now.
Yeah, that's something I need to do, and right now you can't.
Okay.
Can't do it. And I'll.
Oh yeah, sorry. My question was, if you wanted to. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so if you, can you insert a question? So let's say you've finished this and you go back and you say, well, I really need to ask about screen size near the beginning of the wizard. Can I insert a question? You can, but the way it is right now, it'd be sort of ugly. You'd be sort of pointing from the beginning to the end and then back up again. And that's something that I need to do to make it more user-friendly. And that's the area of the program that needs the most work, is the interface to get the information in.
Did you do a survey of
Yeah.
way back 20 years?
Yeah.
Expert systems. What tools as opposed to recreating?
Okay, I'll get to that in just a minute. Actually, I'm going to, if you'll let me put you off, I do cover that in just 1 minute here. Yeah.
Laptop one looked like it was pretty.
Yeah. And that's part of the interface issue. The interface that I'd want to create would be something more graphically based, because I personally work better seeing things. And if you see the complexity of that divorce one, that's probably about as complex as our director thought they would get in terms of number of questions that would have to be asked and number of possible outcomes. So you're looking at two ends of the spectrum in terms of the law clinic anyways. But yeah, we will have a more graphical interface. Any more questions? Okay, let's get back to the PowerPoint here. Major changes coming to the editing interface. So it's work in progress. I just put these in just in case my internet failed here, so I'll go through them quick. Okay, why open source? And how the project here worked to your answer to your question already. The director of our law clinic came to me and asked me if I knew of any programs that would help his students sort of go through these not necessarily difficult areas of the law, but just areas of the law where there's lots of questions that need to be answered so they wouldn't make so many mistakes. So he didn't realize it, but he was asking if I knew of any expert systems that would help him with this. So, first, of course, I went to Google and Googled around to see what I could find. And I found probably 5 or 6 commercial systems that look quite nice. I downloaded, I think, all but one of them, tried them out, and they seemed to work reasonably well. The only problem from our perspective was the licensing fees. The magic number for site licensing fees for these new modern systems seemed to start around $5,000 per site and go up from there. So given that, and I knew the financial situation that our legal clinic is in, I was pretty sure that he'd want some other options other than just that. So I went and looked on the SourceForge website, Fresh Meat, other sites that open source software is usually advertised on, and I found 3 or 4 other systems out there. Downloaded them, tried them. Most of these systems were built in the late 80s to mid-90s. And the interface for them, especially for adding the information, they were very difficult to use in that they were almost their own programming language, or at least macro language, that had quite a steep learning curve. And I tried a couple of them, and I couldn't spend enough time to really make anything useful out of them, just because of the learning curve. If you're doing a lot of it, what they seem to suggest is that you'd have a knowledge engineer that would be the intermediary between the expert and the system. So you'd have the staff lawyer talking to the knowledge engineer who would then program the system. But I was pretty sure that wasn't going to be an option for the legal clinic in terms of hiring someone to be a knowledge engineer to get this data into the system. So the answer to your question, yes, I did. I couldn't find anything out there that was user-friendly enough, basically, for the staff lawyers to input their information. And given that, I reported back to Glenn what I'd found, that there was some good commercial packages, but they were expensive. The free stuff was quite difficult to use. And he thanked me for my efforts, but I got the impression that it wasn't going to go anywhere because they didn't have the cash to buy the commercial packages. So over the next week, sort of the idea percolated in my mind a little bit, and I probably spent about an hour or 2 hours a day for the next week, and I sort of sketched out the system you've seen here on paper, did a little bit of programming, and what you see here is basically what I created in that week. I've tweaked it a little bit since. Obviously, I've broken it a little bit, too, in my tweaking, so I'm going to have to figure out where I broke it last night. But it was enough that we could show people. So we've shown it to the BC Law Foundation and got a little bit of funding from them to help support it. We also got a small amount of funding from the Government of Canada to help in the development, to the point that there's enough funding that I can spend about 3 weeks full-time working on this to hopefully get it to a usable point. So that's how the project started. Oh, get through this. Shall go back. Now, to take it to the next level, we don't have the resources. And that's one of the reasons why we are looking to an open source model of development for this. And just before I sort of get into that in more detail, I'll give you an open source definition. Open source is a work methodology and generally is any computer software whose source code is either in the public domain or distributed under an open source license. Such a license may require that the source code be distributed along with the software and that the source code be freely modifiable. An open source license itself does not necessarily require that the software or its source initially has to be freely, in both senses of the word, available on the internet. Most popular open source software is, however. So put in more simple terms, typically open source software is free in terms of price and is also free in terms of speech, in that you can get the source code and modify the source code if you want to. So let's say the University of Washington really likes this idea and they would like to use something like this. They can go to the website, download the software, install the software, and use it without paying anyone a cent. In the form that it is, they probably will find that they need to add some extra features or functionality to it. So they may get one of their staff members or hire someone on contract to add a bit of extra functionality to it. And given the license that we're releasing this under, they're obligated to submit any changes they make to the source code back to the project. So if they add some functionality to it, they're obligated to turn that back to the project. And we'll look at the changes and probably say, yeah, that was a great idea. Let's include that in the project and make that added functionality available to everyone. Oh, sorry. So that's the idea behind it. There are other types of licenses that don't require the users to give any modifications back to the project that's running it. Probably the best example of that is BSD. It's a variant of Unix that similar to Linux, but in terms of its licensing, anyone can download it, modify the source code, and then not give the changes back to the project. And the best example of that is Apple. The new Apple, yes, we have one here. The new Apple operating system, OS X, is based on BSD Unix. They downloaded it. They've heavily modified it. They put a whole new graphical interface on it, completely different than anything that was done with BSD, and are selling it commercially. And there's nothing to stop someone from downloading our openexpert.org and selling it to someone, but they have to provide the source code with the software that they're selling. They can't sell it as a closed source package without the source code anymore. Are there any general open source questions before sort of move on? Yeah. The nice eye candy. Yeah, the nice eye candy is proprietary. Yeah. So why we took the open source approach? We're lazy and we like others to do our work for us. Well, we're maybe not lazy, but we knew that we didn't have the resources to make a world-class software package on our own. But we did want something, and we did have the resources to make something that would be okay and that would do the basic job that we wanted it to do. So that's what we're doing. We're creating the basic framework and the basic functionality, and then we're giving it away. And hopefully we'll get something back. But in theory, we may not get anything back. But we're not losing anything by giving it away. It's not like we're competing for clients at our legal clinic. We're in a geographically bound area, and we're giving our legal advice away in any case. So if we can help other legal clinics in any way with this software, that's wonderful. Even if they don't add any functionality back, we're glad that we could, share what we've done with other people. If they do add some functionality to it, we'll be more than happy to make use of that as well and then distribute that to the community. No.
Is that something that the clinic itself would like?
There, sharing wizards can help everyone in the legal clinic community. So no, there is no requirement that they submit the data that they've created. So if, let's say, the University of Washington creates a tax law wizard, they don't have to, the data is theirs, they can do whatever they want with it. But we do want to set up a framework that if they want to, they can upload that wizard, so to speak, for other people to use and download. Now, for example, our divorce wizard, I'm sure there are some peculiarities in BC law that don't apply in other jurisdictions. But we'll make that freely available so that the University of Washington can download that and then tweak it to fit their particular circumstances and the peculiarities of Washington state divorce law. And actually, I'm glad you brought it up in that way, because I didn't want to give people the impression that they would have to give the data back. But I think we'd probably encourage people to if they can, just because it'll be helpful to everyone else. It'll add a considerable amount of value to the software, because the actual setup of the software is relatively trivial when compared to the amount of time and effort and work that would go into creating these wizards and the expertise going into these wizards. Exactly. As well as download and install others. Yeah, we're not, I haven't even got to that point, but that's definitely something that will be part of the basic functionality that we want to build for ourselves. Even if we could just, if one other law school did it, it would be worthwhile at that point if they were willing to share. So what next? Well, you can't quite download it yet from openexpert.org, but you will be able to in a couple of weeks. I've just got to package it up nicely, basically, and that's on the top of my to-do list. Just so you know what the server requirements are to run it, you need an Apache web server with PHP support and a MySQL database server, which if you've got any Linux server, you're almost guaranteed to have those server software packages either installed or easily installable. You just need to talk to your system administrator about that. The other thing that I think, and I haven't talked to my boss here about this yet, so this may be a surprise for him, but one thing that I hope we're going to be able to do is if there are clinics who are all Microsoft shops, in theory you could install an Apache web server with PHP and MySQL on a Windows box, but I've never done it, and I don't know I'd ever want to try. So I'm hoping one of the things that we'll be able to do is host other clinics, at least for a period of time, so they can try out the software in their setting, see if they like it, and over time, if it's something that really works for them, they can get a little Linux box set up somewhere, or we could, host for a small fee or something like that. But that's something that we're thinking about anyways. And one thing that I was hoping to do out of this as well, if you're interested in keeping tabs on the progress of the project, I'm hoping to get some business cards or even just your email address on a slip of paper. And I'll put you on a listserv that would be an announcement-only listserv. So, for example, if we had a new release come out, it would be announced so that you knew that there was added functionality in the software and would be kept abreast of developments. And it would be like 1 or 2 emails a month, so you're not going to have your inbox flooded by any means. And we'll put you in for a draw for this beautiful openexpert.org T-shirt that I'm sure that you all put your cards in just for that in and of itself. But it's something that I did up. I did the graphics for this, I think, 2 weeks ago. And this is a Cafe Press T-shirt that I just got 2 of them done up real quickly. Questions or comments about the software, about open source development? Sorry, what's that? Oh, PHP. And that's primarily because it's something I'm familiar with, 1, and 2, the hardware and software requirements. Any Linux server will have PHP, Apache, and MySQL easily installable. Java-based is trickier, basically. The other reason we went to a web-based interface is because I wanted it to be able to be used on small form factors easily. So you can use it on your Trio or your wireless Palm device quite easily. And I'm not sure how much that would be used, but I at least wanted to say that we could do it with the project. So I wanted that. Sorry.
I'm assuming it wouldn't be difficult to add it. The students could add it.
Yeah, and I started. Sorry. Yeah, would it be easy to add functionality so you can save the answers or save the sort of carry forward items for the Staffler? And I was actually working on that last night, only in the form of an email. So you could put an email address to send the information to, and that would be a quick, dirty, easy way to do it. And I'm sure eventually the law schools would like to see statistics on usage, and you could do some really interesting data analysis given people going through the system as well. And it's something that we probably wouldn't do in the basic, in my 3 weeks that I'm going to be working on that. But if someone's interested in doing that, it's open source, so it could be done by other people easily as well. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Now it's not going to intake the person. So the question was, if she was a student, how would she use this software intaking a person with a divorce problem? So this isn't going to replace your case management software, but what we see it doing is helping the student better categorize the problem and know which path they need to take this person down. So in British Columbia, basically, if you're wanting to get a divorce, there are 8 different paths that you can go down to, or that you need to go down to get a divorce based on your circumstances. And lots of errors are made, from what I understand, by the students, in that they don't ask all the right questions and they go down the wrong path. And then they have to backtrack, fill out more paperwork, and then go down the right path when they realize that they made a mistake. So this helps them to get going down the right path. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in the interview room or over the phone or however, I'm not sure how all the clinics are set up. But if there is a PC in the interview room with a web browser, all you need is a web browser. It can be any kind of web browser, or even a Palm device if they wanted to do it on a Palm device that was wireless capable and could access the internet. Yeah, that's not a technical question, but I'll give you what I think might be an answer for that. Is if the student can explain up front what the if they're coming in for a divorce, for example, the student can explain that this is a complex area of the law, and we have a software package that will help categorize your problem better, so that we can make sure that we get all the appropriate paperwork filled out and don't have to redo anything because something's been missed. Maybe you tell them it's not terribly difficult, but there's lots of details that we need to keep track of, and this software will help me keep track of the details so nothing gets dropped off the table.
This makes
Yeah.
it would seem to me that
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're doctor's offices, I think.
Yeah.
Straight you in there. But I'm straight.
Yeah.
It's got me sitting, so I don't see.
Yeah.
Really picky.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Because then you're also having the student looking at.
Yeah. It would depend on the setup of the interview rooms too as well. Or it could be done later over the phone, in which case they don't even know it's happening. They could do a preliminary interview, tell them I need to call you back with some more questions, and then they don't even know it's happening. But yeah, I've set foot in a legal clinic, but I've got two brothers that are lawyers, but I'm not a lawyer myself. I've never done an interview either in a legal clinic setting. So. But no, very good question. And in terms of implementation, you would want to make sure it was implemented properly so that people still had confidence in the students. And yeah, those are good
Well,
suggestions.
especially somebody who
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, it was. Yeah.
Height can be on the first.
Yeah. Well, and the Palm device works quite well. I've got a little Trio 600 that has a tiny little display, and it renders this. Well, you can't see it now, but it renders it quite nicely. It all fits on the screen, and they could be, you're right, it could look like they're taking notes. Oh, I see Ken's going to take a look now. Sorry. Yeah. And you're right. Just to repeat the question, it seems like this could have wider application for help desk. Yeah, it could be, and you're right. The name change, actually, and I changed this. I had the bottom part here, expert system for legal clinics. I had that even more generic, but I changed it for this conference, so I at least have some tie into the law. But you're right, and there are other ways of gathering information. I won't go into details now, but for example, if you can ask questions with ranges of confidence, and then given a fairly trivial statistical analysis, give them answers based on, I'm 80% confident or 20% confident on a range of questions. And that's something that I'll be consulting with our legal clinic to see if that would be useful. But you're right. It could be applied in a whole bunch of different settings. One example that I saw on a website, one of the commercial packages, an example they gave was a wizard for picking cell phones. So a cell phone company, they ask you, it's basically like the laptop. You're looking at price, you're looking at size, battery life, and given what you want or what your preferences are, it'll give you a list of, 3 or 4 cell phones that you could choose. But it could be used for medical information or medical advice as well, just as easily. It's actually something that I think our government in British Columbia has done. They've purchased a package because it's socialized. I'm sure HMOs do it here so that you can go in and do some self-diagnostic without running to emergency all the time. Are there any other questions? Yeah?
When are your 3 weeks starting?
When are my 3 weeks starting? Well, I'm going to another conference next week, so it'll be before the end of the summer. I won't have 3 solid weeks. I am the IT department with some help from some part-time people, so I couldn't devote 3 solid weeks to it. But I'm hoping to get most of it done before the end of the summer. And again, if you drop off your email address or a card, I'll put you on the listserv. And again, this beautiful T-shirt could be yours. Well, he was my inspiration for this, and he's helped me in terms of, for example, one thing that I added recently was the carry forward provision, so that if the example in the divorce, the annulment, if they were mentally unstable, one thing I hadn't built into it originally was the ability to carry forward issues that need to be looked at the end. So we have quite a close working relationship on it in terms of I'm working on it. I tell him when I've made changes or improvements. He'll go play around with it and give me feedback. So it's... Yeah.
What is it that the clinic director wants to get out of this?
Yeah.
That you want?
So what does a clinic director want to get out of it? The clinic director wants to be able to reduce errors by his students. And also, that was his initial goal, was to reduce errors in complex areas of the law, complex in terms of lots of options, like divorce, so that the students weren't wasting time and the students weren't wasting the time of the clients. The other issue that he's realized since then was this could also be great at the beginning of the semester to take a bit of a burden off of the staff lawyers. So that if a student comes to the staff lawyer with a question about divorce, if they haven't already, he can direct them to the wizard to at least better categorize the problem and to bring out the pivotal issues that probably will need to be addressed, so that when he comes back to the staff lawyer, they've pretty much got the issues that need to be addressed out in the open, and he can help them with any issues they might have at that point. In terms of what I want to get out of it, it's an interesting project for me. The University of Victoria is a great place to work, and this was interesting, and I'm allowed to do it, so I do. Any other questions or comments? Sorry.
You're running basically as a database, as a backend,
Yeah.
inserting the information. Where do you get the questions? Where's the logic in this question?
Yeah.
Number 2, you're in British Columbia, I'm in Buffalo, New York. Legal pleading, first admissions.
Yeah.
So we have to recreate. I see the logic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you need to actually meet with
Yeah.
The language should be understandable. Last one is so on-screen and easy to do. Well, and they print out the information, and then they will options are.
Yeah.
More submissions or attend CALI.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer your question about the law being different in Buffalo than in Victoria. It is different, and I don't know how different. I'm not a lawyer. But I suspect there are some similarities at some level. So you would have to go in and change things. Let's say, for example, mental incompetence isn't ground for annulment in Buffalo, for example. So you could go in and take that out. To answer your question about the logic is built in that... just bring it back up here. The logic is built in here. So basically you're linking to different items. And this checkbox, there's no indication at this point of what it is, but basically it's a carry forward item. If you click on that, it'll carry that forward for review at the end, so that you know that that's an item that needs to be looked at in more detail. And it is easy to use, but the example that I gave of my little heart attack or non-heart attack there is I think, instructive. A layperson can use this, and probably most of the time they'll get fairly good advice. But in the end, if you're dealing with something like a divorce or other legal issue, you probably want to check with a lawyer just to make sure you've got it nailed down. And I don't know, some clinics may want to give that or use it as a publicly available resource that people can use and then print out the results and come in and say, this is, I did the wizard thing, I need these issues dealt with, I think. What do I need to do? Because it'll help categorize the problem, let them know what the key issues are, but they're probably going to need some help in actually resolving them, at least in the examples that our legal clinic or in the areas that our legal clinic wants to use this. I hope that's answered it, at least in part. Any other questions? I think our time's almost up, but maybe... Well, thank you very much.
Oh, very interesting.
Thank you.
So if I've taken this,
Yeah.
or if the student has taken this, can they get a printout of the whole thing?
Yeah. I'll make it so they can email it.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Somebody did answer that question.
Thank you. Yeah, give them to me, and I don't know how I'm going to do this draw if everyone gets away.